Hello, friends. It's Nancy with Astrology and Angel Mediums here today with another kind of unique video. As you may have seen in the title, these are decks that I love, but that I don't really use, or that I find are a little not complicated, but maybe not the easiest for me to kind of like intuitively use, or I don't use them for other reasons, whether it's maybe I don't know how the artwork would be received or things of that nature. So I'm going to kind of talk about why I don't typically reach for these decks out of my collection. And I have a lot of decks. I've owned about, I would say maybe like 250 to 300 decks over the years. I only have, I think, about 150 currently. It's been a while since I've actually done an inventory and kind of counted to see what I have. So that means that I've gotten rid of about half of those, or at least over 100 decks that I've kind of either sold or given away or have found a new home for. So as you can see, there's a little bit of everything here. I do have a couple of tarot decks and a couple oracle decks here as well. I do have, again, some other decks that I'm like, I hang on to because it's just like nostalgic for me in different ways. But these are the ones that I've either, kind of see that just are collecting dust in different ways. So I'm going to talk about some of these guys over here first. So we're going to just move these guys out of the way and then we'll kind of get into it. So, very first deck is the Good Tarot. Now, I've actually been trying to use this a little bit more often, and I never would have purchased this deck for myself. I never would have felt drawn to utilize this deck. This was actually a gift from my best friend's family after she had passed, and they were going through her collection, and it was in a box of things that they thought that she would want me to have. And it's a beautiful deck, don't get me wrong. It's just, it's very watery kind of energy. It's beautiful. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's interesting that's called the Good Tarot, because that kind of implies that there's a bad tarot, right? But no, to me, it's just really, I think the size of it is just probably the biggest thing that's kind of off-putting to me. And you probably have seen this on my channel if you've watched any of my pickup piles. I've been trying to use it. I've even used it on my like kind of personal page on Instagram for an April tarot challenge. I was trying to kind of utilize decks that I don't typically reach for to kind of connect a little bit more. So the images are beautiful. It's just a little too like good woo-woo, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. I am not afraid to kind of recognize and realize that life has a little bit of everything. And so this deck is just, and plus it's so new. Obviously my best friend didn't really use it very often. So it's very stiff. It's, I feel like compared to the other Colette Baron Reed decks that I've had over the years, there's just like not that same level of like quality, if that makes sense. The cardstock's okay. It's typical Hay House. It can fold, it can bend, but there's like no gilding. There's no edges. There's nothing that kind of makes it stand out in a way that I'd be like, oh yeah, no, that's a beautiful deck. Let me use that. And again, this size is kind of awkward for 78 cards. So it's nice. And I'm trying to use it a little bit more, but it's not my favorite. It's not one that I'm going to like suggest and recommend to people if they're starting out on their tarot journey. So I guess if we kind of just keep talking about tarot decks, is this one, Tarot Oscuro. And I think that this is a wicked deck. It is so cool. I received this as a birthday gift from my oldest. And it's funny because it doesn't really read for me, which is why I don't utilize it. Also, the imagery on it is it's very artistic. But it does have that Rider-Waite Smith style kind of artwork. There is a lot of nudity. There's a lot of very interesting interpretations of things. I'm trying not to like get in trouble for posting stuff like this. So while some of the cards are very like whatever, some of them are like wicked looking. I mean, this is like an acid trip, right? So again, it's one of these things where I think it'd be kind of challenging to bust this out with just any particular client. It is a really cool, fun, artistic deck. So if you're into things like that, this is definitely one to look into. I've never really had seen it. I'm like, oh my God, trying not to get in trouble by having the wrong pictures come up. All right, we're just gonna, and that's another reason why I'm also kind of hesitant to utilize it publicly and things like that, just because there's a lot of nudity. But it's really cool. It has this brown edging on it. It's just really funky, cool artwork, like very much like an acid trip or something along those lines, where you're kind of like, there's like this psychedelic kind of vibe to it. And like I said, I have a hard time with this deck just not reading for me, because if I were to use it, I would definitely use it for like my own personal readings, but it just doesn't read for me. So it's one of these things where I feel like every deck has its own personality, and this one just isn't one that works well with what I have going on. But what is very cool about it is that it is also in Spanish and in French. So if you're looking for, something like that that has English, Spanish, and French in it, this is a great deck for that. And seeing as to which those are the three languages that I speak, I thought it was really cool because I don't usually see English, Spanish, and French all in one tarot deck. So moving right along to other tarot decks. Next up is going to be the Thoth Tarot. Now, I got this because I was curious, right? As someone that has been using the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot decks, style decks for years and years and years, and that's what I learned on. I was super curious about what the differences were between this system by Aleister Crowley and how different it is. Now, the reason why I don't use this deck very often is that I feel it's very, very intense. It's very deep. And so I've almost just kind of exclusively used this for very deep personal journaling, because it's just so raw. And so I don't use this with clients because I just feel like it's a little too much. And sometimes people are just not ready for that kind of stuff. The imagery, the artwork and the imagery is divine. It's beautiful. I just love how funky this is. Again, if you saw my favorite decks that I love to use, it's probably reminding you a little bit of the Justice League Tarot, which again is that Art Nouveau kind of style, which is when this artwork I think was done was in the 1920s or so. So it has that kind of style. So it's not that I don't love it. It's just not something I'm going to reach for time and time again. And so there are also, it's a different card system in the sense of he had his own interpretations, and the cards just have like different meanings and things like that. So it's not always like the easiest transition from a Rider-Waite-Smith to this deck. I do think it's a lot of fun if you're looking for a lot of personal development, a lot of personal journaling, or really like working on like some sort of healing journey. This is a great deck to use. Now, two little cute mini decks. The very first one, it's not that I don't love it. It's just, I don't reach for it very often. And maybe this is because I have too many decks that look like this. I'm a sucker for mini decks, so I will purchase them. And I look at this again and I'm like, it's just so beautiful. I should use it more often. But I just don't. It's in the back of my little cubby with all of these other decks that I typically will reach for. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's very beautiful artwork. As you can see, there's a lot of details. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So maybe I'll start kind of pulling this one out a little bit more just so that I can, reconnect to it, because there's a reason why I bought it, right? And not just because it was a mini size, because I do love a mini size tarot deck. Next up is going to be the 78 Tarot Magical. So if you are in the tarot community or anything like that, the 78 Tarot sets come out once a year. They're an amazing project. I think it's fantastic. And I decided to get the pocket size because, again, I am a sucker for small, for small little decks. And it is beautiful. It is. I love all of the interpretations on it of these traditional kind of images. I just don't reach for it. And it may just be that as I have kind of been more connected to what sort of decks I want, I think that maybe I've kind of outgrown this kind of style. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. There's beautiful cards. I mean, look at this Empress. That is divine. There's beautiful cards in these decks, and just really beautiful interpretations. But I think I've just gotten to a place where I want something that feels easy for me to use and grab. And even though this is like the perfect size, I just don't. And because it is kind of a limited edition deck, I don't want to cart it around and wreck it when I'm out and about doing readings. So it's one of these things where it's just kind of staying on my shelf and just not really getting utilized. All right, now let's talk about some of these Oracle decks. Now these two are going to be very similar. They're both by Alana Fairchild, and I do love her decks and her work. I was trying to say work and deck. One of my favorite decks from her is the Sacred Rebels Oracle. I just feel like that one has more of an allowance for intuitive reading. And while I absolutely totally love the artist Jimmy Manton, who has done these decks and then a bunch of other decks for like Stacey DeMarco, and I totally love his art style. I mean, look at this. That is sickening. You cannot look at that and not say that that is insane talent. And even looking at the cards, but because I'm not well versed on Kali and her story, or like the, Hindu pantheon of gods and goddesses, I feel like this is not the most like intuitively used kind of deck for me. I think if you're into and are familiar with these names and these stories, perfect. But for me, it's like then I have to rely on the guidebook. And then the guidebook is insane because there's several pages to kind of get through, and it's great. Don't get me wrong. So if you're like really wanting to kind of do a whole like study on these things, that's fantastic. And the same thing with the Isis Oracle. There is some imagery and some of the things that do make sense to me, but others I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't know what that means, or I don't know what that could possibly stand for. And again, it has his Jimmy Manton's beautiful artwork. And some of these, because they do kind of have a little bit of like some key words, so to speak, it can kind of help you connect a little bit more to that energy. But again, it's the same as the Isis Oracle. And so to me, they're just absolutely beautiful pieces of artwork that I just do not reach for because I don't find it easy for my intuition to kick in and use these cards in a way that feels natural for me. If I feel like I have to constantly go through a deck's like guidebook, I feel like it's like stunting to me and like how I read. Next up is the Witching Hour Oracle. Now this is beautiful, 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 but for whatever reason, I just don't reach for it. So it's just been sitting on my shelf. And I think it's cool that it's like yellow. I don't know. So there is some cool cards in here. So don't get me wrong. It has really interesting information. I guess if I really wanted to utilize it, I could. I just haven't been reaching for it. And so maybe I need to kind of challenge myself and put it into my kit whenever I'm going places to do readings and like force myself to do readings with it. But again, I'm a Taurus. I will settle for what feels familiar and what feels comfortable. So it is a beautiful deck, really cool artwork. I really love the artistic interpretations in it. I just don't reach for it. And so it's one of these things where I'm like, is it time for me to rehome it and find somewhere else for it to go? Because I'm not using it, and I'd much rather a deck be somewhere where it's going to be used and loved. And finally, I'm going to talk about the Intuition Oracle. This is a deck I bought for myself for my birthday a couple of years ago now. I love Monty Farber and Amy Zerner's works. Actually, I used to use their like spirit board. I don't even know what it was called, but it's a cool box. It's different. And I got this because I love this artwork. It's funky. If you ever had the Enchanted Tarot from both of these people as well, it's very similar to that. But these are oracle cards. Now, the reason why I don't use them as much is because, as much as this may have an affirmation and a thing on the back, it's just hard for me to kind of connect the story sometimes. And so I feel like, again, it just doesn't allow me to intuitively connect to it. And it may just be a thing of like having to practice using it more often. So sometimes the affirmations make sense. Some of these are a little bit weird or don't really like make too much sense for me. So like this is like the spectrum card. Beautiful. I root out and reject prejudice in myself and others. I don't understand how this affirmation would go with the spectrum, if that makes sense. So to me, I feel like maybe I get a little caught up in like the card names versus what's going on, or like the actor. I know how to act properly and wisely in this situation. If I think of the actor, I think of someone that's like not being themselves. They're putting on an act. So to me, it's almost like, how does this affirmation connect to the name of this card? Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but that is why I don't typically reach for it. Oh my God, I'm finding all the nude cards today. But it is very beautiful artwork. I just love the punch of colors and all of the details and all of the different things and layers in it to kind of go off of. So I think if I were to just maybe not be so stuck on trying to make the back of the card make sense, then everything would be good. So I'm not going to put that back in there because it's giving me issues. But, oh, and I meant to say, yeah, the guidebook has a lot of information. It talks about the art and how to kind of translate how it, relates to the card and things like that. And I don't feel like it always translate very well to like the specific art choices that they've made. So I hope that makes sense. Why don't you guys let me know what decks you might have in your collection that maybe you're not utilizing too often, or why, or is there a deck in here that you're like, I would totally use that deck, or I love that deck? Let me know. I will be more than happy to see what you guys have to say. So thank you so much for joining me. Have a good one.